Alex wasn't your typical art thief. He didn't have a shadowy past, a team of experts, or a fancy getaway car. He was just Alex. A mid-level employee at the City Art Museum, mostly pushing papers and making sure the temperature in the Dutch master's wing stayed just right. But Alex had a secret, a burning desire for a life far beyond his modest apartment and microwave dinners. He craved the kind of life he saw in the art he guarded, extravagant parties, exotic travels, and clothes that cost more than his car. And he had a plan to get it. It wasn't a good plan, not really. More of a desperate, half-baked scheme fueled by late-night movies and too much coffee. But it was his plan. It involved stealing a painting. Not just any painting, mind you. The plan revolved around Starry Night over the Rhine, a vibrant landscape that had been the museum's crown jewel for decades. It was rumored to be worth millions, a king's ransom in the art world. Alex figured if he could just borrow it for a while, he could sell it and finally have the life he deserved. He'd always felt overlooked, underappreciated. This was his chance to show them all. He knew the risks. Stealing art was serious business. But Alex convinced himself he was different. He wasn't a criminal, he was an entrepreneur of sorts. Besides, he told himself, the museum was practically begging to be robbed. The security was decent, sure, but predictable. The guards made their rounds like clockwork, and the cameras had blind spots he'd already mapped out in his head. The key, Alex realized, was to not actually steal the painting. Not in the traditional smash-and-grab sense, anyway. He needed to replace it. He spent months studying the painting, memorizing every brushstroke, every subtle shift in color. He even took a painting class at the local community center, much to the amusement of his coworkers. Getting in touch with your artistic side, Alex, they'd joke. Little did they know. His masterpiece wasn't hanging in a gallery, it was hidden in his spare bedroom, covered in drop cloths. It was a near-perfect replica of Starry Night over the Rhine, painstakingly crafted over countless nights. Alex had even aged the canvas with tea stains and carefully matched the frame. It was so good, he sometimes wondered if he should just sell the replica and forget the whole thing. But the real deal was worth so much more. Now all that was left was to put his plan into action. Starry Night over the Rhine wasn't just a pretty picture. It was an experience. Standing before it, you could almost hear the gentle lapping of the river, feel the cool night air on your skin, and smell the damp earth. The artist, a relatively unknown German painter named Wilhelm Meisner, had captured something magical in that canvas. A sense of peace, of wonder, a moment frozen in time. That's what made it so valuable, so sought after. The painting depicted a serene nighttime scene. The Rhine River flowed calmly, reflecting the shimmering starlight above. Quaint villages dotted the riverbanks, their windows glowing with warm, inviting light. A sense of tranquility permeated the entire scene. It was a painting that spoke to the soul, reminding viewers of simpler times and the beauty that exists even in darkness. The City Art Museum had acquired Starry Night over the Rhine almost a century ago, and it had been their most prized possession ever since. Experts estimated its value at around $20 million, but its true worth was immeasurable. It was the painting that drew crowds, the one that graced postcards and posters, the one that made the museum a must-see destination for art lovers from around the world. For Alex, though, the painting represented something else entirely: opportunity. $20 million could buy him a mansion overlooking the ocean, a fleet of luxury cars, and a lifetime supply of gourmet meals. It could erase the years of pinching pennies and dreaming of a better life. It was a golden ticket, and he was determined to cash it in. He chose Starry Night over the Rhine not just for its value, but also for its accessibility. It wasn't hidden behind layers of security glass or protected by laser beams. It hung in a relatively quiet corner of the museum, accessible to anyone who dared to reach out and touch it. That, Alex thought, made it the perfect target. There were other valuable paintings in the museum, of course. But many were too iconic, too recognizable. Stealing a Rembrandt or a Monet would be like stealing the Mona Lisa, an instant international sensation. Starry Night Over the Rhine, while valuable, was slightly less famous. Alex hoped that would buy him some time, give him a head start before the art world realized what was missing. He was counting on the painting's relative obscurity to be his greatest advantage. Alex treated his plan like a military operation. He spent weeks observing the museum's security protocols, noting the times of the guard patrols, the placement of the security cameras, and the days when the museum was most crowded. He learned the shift schedules of his co-workers, identifying potential allies, or at least, people who wouldn't ask too many questions, and those to avoid at all costs. The replica was his primary focus. He couldn't just slap some paint on a canvas and hope for the best. It had to be perfect, indistinguishable from the original. He sourced the finest art supplies, the same kind that Wilhelm Meisner himself would have used. He studied Meisner's techniques, analyzing his brushstrokes and color palette. He practiced for hours, meticulously recreating small sections of the painting until he could do it in his sleep. He even went so far as to research the history of the painting's frame. He discovered that it was a custom-made frame from a small artisan shop in Germany. He tracked down the shop, now run by the grandson of the original craftsman, and commissioned a replica frame, ensuring that it was an exact match to the original. It was this level of detail, Alex believed, that would make his plan a success. Timing was everything. Alex knew he couldn't just waltz into the museum and swap the paintings in broad daylight. He needed to find a window of opportunity, a moment when the security was lax and the crowds were manageable. He identified the third Saturday of the month as the ideal day. It was typically a busy day for the museum, but the afternoon shift tended to be understaffed, and the guards were often distracted by the larger crowds. He also needed a distraction. Something to divert attention away from the Dutch master's wing while he made the switch. He decided to stage a minor incident, a fake medical emergency or a loud argument, near the main entrance. This would draw the guards away from his target area, giving him the time he needed to complete his mission. He even rehearsed the distraction with a friend, making sure it was believable and effective. He wrote everything down, checklists, schedules, contingency plans. He filled notebooks with diagrams, notes, and reminders. He used sticky notes to mark important dates and times, plastering them all over his apartment. He was determined to leave nothing to chance. This was his one shot, his chance to escape his ordinary life and embrace the world of luxury he so desperately craved. The third Saturday arrived, and Alex felt a knot of nervous energy tightening in his stomach. He woke up hours before his shift, double-checking his supplies and reviewing his plan one last time. He had a custom-built carrying case, disguised as an equipment maintenance box, large enough to hold the rolled-up replica. He'd even added a false bottom to store the tools he'd need to remove the painting from the wall. He arrived at the museum, trying to act as normal as possible. He greeted his co-workers with a forced smile, making small talk about the weather and the weekend's upcoming events. Inside, though, his mind was racing. He could feel the weight of the replica in the back of his car, a constant reminder of what he was about to do. The museum was bustling with activity. Families, tourists, and art enthusiasts filled the galleries, creating a symphony of noise and movement. Alex navigated through the crowds, his heart pounding in his chest. He made his way to the Dutch master's wing, trying to blend in with the other visitors. He checked his watch. It was almost time. He gave his friend, Mark, the signal. Mark, a struggling actor, was tasked with creating the distraction. A few minutes later, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. Alex heard raised voices and saw people rushing towards the scene. It was working. He took a deep breath and approached Starry Night Over the Rhine. The painting seemed to glow under the soft museum lights, beckoning him closer. He glanced around, making sure no one was watching. The guards were all clustered near the entrance, dealing with the staged emergency. This was his chance. He quickly unlatched the frame from the wall, carefully lowering the painting into his carrying case. He then unrolled the replica and hung it in its place. The swap took less than 2 minutes. He stepped back, examining his work. The replica looked perfect, almost identical to the original. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He closed the carrying case, grabbed his tools, and walked out of the Dutch master's wing, trying to appear nonchalant. He made his way towards the employee exit, his heart still pounding in his chest. He was almost home free. As he walked, a sticky note fluttered out of his pocket, landing unnoticed in a nearby trash can. It was a small, yellow note with a reminder scrawled in his handwriting: Saturday, Rhine, 3 p.m. He didn't notice it fall. He was too focused on getting out of the museum and starting his new life. He had no idea that this tiny piece of paper would soon unravel his entire plan. Back at his apartment, Alex felt a surge of exhilaration wash over him. He had done it. He had actually pulled it off. He opened the carrying case and gazed at Starry Night over the Rhine, its colors vibrant and alive under his living room lights. He ran his fingers over the canvas, feeling the texture of the paint, the weight of the frame. It was real. It was his. He immediately started making calls, contacting potential buyers he had researched online. He used coded language, referring to the painting as a rare vintage wine, and its value as the price of a small island. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just advertise the painting on Craigslist. He needed to find a discreet buyer, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions and would be willing to pay a premium for the artwork. The first few calls were dead ends. Some potential buyers were suspicious, others were simply not interested. But then, he got a promising lead. A wealthy art collector from overseas expressed interest in acquiring the painting. He was willing to travel to the city to inspect the artwork in person. Alex felt a jolt of excitement. This could be it. He spent the next few days preparing for the meeting. He cleaned his apartment, arranged the painting in a favorable light, and practiced his sales pitch. He wanted to project an image of confidence and professionalism, even though he was terrified on the inside. He imagined the money rolling in, the life of luxury he had always dreamed of. He pictured himself lounging on a tropical beach, sipping cocktails, and watching the sunset. He would finally be free from the drudgery of his museum job, free to pursue his passions and live life to the fullest. He even started making plans to disappear. He researched new identities, offshore bank accounts, and exotic destinations. He wanted to vanish without a trace, leaving behind his old life and embracing a new one. He felt like a character in a spy movie, living on the edge, one step ahead of the authorities. He knew the risks were high. If he got caught, he could face years in prison. But the potential reward was too tempting to resist. He was willing to gamble everything for a chance at a better life. He convinced himself that he was doing nothing wrong. He was simply taking what was rightfully his, what he deserved. He was an artist, an entrepreneur, a visionary. He was not a thief. Or so he told himself. He just needed to sell the painting, disappear, and start over. He was so close he could almost taste it. Little did he know, his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him, all because of a tiny yellow sticky note. Sarah wasn't your typical security guard. She wasn't just there to push buttons and watch monitors. She had a keen eye for detail and a passion for art, qualities that made her an invaluable member of the museum's security team. She loved her job, not just because it paid the bills, but because it allowed her to be surrounded by beauty and history every day. She had worked at the City Art Museum for 5 years, starting as a part-time guard and working her way up to a supervisory position. She knew every inch of the museum, every painting, every sculpture, every artifact. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of art history and could spot a fake a mile away. Sarah was meticulous and observant, always on the lookout for anything out of the ordinary. She took her job seriously, understanding that she was responsible for protecting priceless works of art from theft and damage. She took pride in her work, knowing that she was playing a vital role in preserving culture and history for future generations. She had a quiet demeanor, but beneath her calm exterior lay a sharp mind and a steely resolve. She wasn't easily intimidated, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind, even when it meant challenging her superiors. She was respected by her colleagues for her intelligence, her dedication, and her unwavering commitment to her job. She was also a bit of a puzzle. She kept to herself, rarely socializing with her coworkers outside of work. She had no family in the city and didn't talk much about her past. She was a lone wolf, content with her own company and her love of art. On that fateful Saturday, Sarah was assigned to the Dutch master's wing. She made her rounds, checking the security cameras, inspecting the paintings, and making sure everything was in order. She noticed the increased crowds and the heightened security presence due to the earlier incident near the entrance. She was on high alert, knowing that a distraction like that could be a cover for something more sinister. As she approached Starry Night over the Rhine, something caught her eye. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to trigger her suspicion. The frame. It looked slightly crooked. Not by much, just a fraction of an inch, but enough to make her pause and take a closer look. It wasn't something she had noticed before. Had someone bumped into the painting? Or was something else going on? Sarah decided to investigate further. She radioed her supervisor, requesting a closer inspection of the painting. She didn't want to cause a panic, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A few minutes later, her supervisor, Mr. Davis, arrived. He was a seasoned security professional, but he lacked Sarah's artistic eye. He examined the painting briefly, dismissing her concerns. "It's probably just the lighting, Sarah. Everything looks fine to me." Sarah wasn't convinced. She knew that the lighting in the Dutch master's wing was carefully calibrated to enhance the paintings, not distort them. She pressed her case, insisting that the frame looked different than she remembered. Mr. Davis sighed. He didn't want to argue with Sarah, but he also didn't want to waste time on what he considered a wild goose chase. He agreed to take the painting down for a closer look, just to appease her. They carefully removed Starry Night over the Rhine from the wall and placed it on a padded table in a nearby storage room. Sarah examined the frame closely, running her fingers along its edges. She noticed tiny scratches and imperfections that weren't there before. The wood felt different, too. It was lighter, newer. She then turned her attention to the canvas. She examined the brushstrokes, the colors, the texture of the paint. Something felt off. The painting looked too perfect. Too clean. It lacked the subtle imperfections and signs of age that she had come to associate with the original. She grabbed a magnifying glass and examined the painting even more closely. She noticed tiny inconsistencies in the brushstrokes, subtle variations in the color palette. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. The painting was a fake. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This isn't the original. It's a replica." Mr. Davis was stunned. He couldn't believe it. He had been so quick to dismiss Sarah's concerns, so confident in his own judgment. Now, he realized that she had been right all along. He immediately contacted the museum director and the head of security. The museum went into lockdown. An investigation was launched. Every painting, every sculpture, every artifact was carefully examined. The hunt for the real, Starry Night over the Rhine was on. And the clock was ticking. They had no idea how long the replica had been hanging in its place, or where the original painting had been taken. They knew they had to act fast if they wanted to recover the stolen artwork. Meanwhile, a cleaning crew was making its rounds, emptying trash cans and tidying up the museum. One of the custodians, Maria, noticed a small, yellow sticky note in a trash can near the employee exit. It was crumpled and discarded, but the writing on it was still legible. "Saturday, Rhine, 3 p.m. Maria, a curious and observant woman, picked up the sticky note and examined it more closely. She recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Alex, one of the museum's mid-level employees. She had seen him writing notes like this before, often scribbling reminders and schedules on sticky notes and plastering them all over his desk. She didn't know what the note meant, but she had a feeling it was important. She decided to turn it over to security. Little did she know, that tiny piece of paper would be the key to unraveling Alex's entire plan. The sticky note made its way to the head of security, Mr. Johnson, a gruff but intelligent man with years of experience in law enforcement. He examined the note carefully, recognizing the potential significance of the cryptic message. Saturday, Rhine, 3 p.m. What could it mean? He immediately pulled up Alex's employee file, reviewing his background and performance records. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Alex was a reliable employee, always punctual and hardworking. He had no history of disciplinary problems or suspicious behavior. But Mr. Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The timing of the sticky note, the discovery of the replica painting, the earlier distraction near the entrance, it all seemed to point to a coordinated plan. He decided to investigate further. He showed the sticky note to several of Alex's co-workers, asking if they recognized the handwriting. Most of them shrugged it off, saying they couldn't be sure. But one employee, a young intern named Emily, recognized the handwriting immediately. "That's Alex's handwriting," she said, without hesitation. "I've seen him write notes like that all the time. He's always using sticky notes to remind himself of things." Mr. Johnson felt a surge of adrenaline. He had his suspect. He ordered a search of Alex's office, hoping to find more evidence to link him to the theft. The search of Alex's office turned up a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. They found notebooks filled with diagrams of the museum's security system, checklists of tasks to complete, and detailed plans for the painting swap. They even found a receipt from an art supply store for the purchase of high-quality paints and canvases. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no doubt in Mr. Johnson's mind that Alex was the mastermind behind the theft of Starry Night Over the Rhine. He immediately contacted the police and requested an arrest warrant. Meanwhile, Alex was still at his apartment, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the wealthy art collector. He had no idea that the police were on their way, that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him. He was so close to achieving his dreams, so close to escaping his ordinary life. But his dreams were about to turn into a nightmare. All because of a tiny yellow sticky note and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. The police arrived at Alex's apartment just as the art collector was pulling up in his limousine. Alex was stunned. He couldn't believe what was happening. He tried to run, but the police quickly apprehended him. They searched his apartment, finding Starry Night Over the Rhine hidden beneath a pile of blankets in his spare bedroom. Alex was arrested and taken into custody, facing charges of theft, forgery, and conspiracy. His dreams of a life of luxury were shattered. His carefully planned heist had been foiled by a simple mistake, forgetting to dispose of a sticky note. The museum director, Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, was a formidable woman with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. She had dedicated her entire life to the preservation and promotion of art, and she viewed the theft of Starry Night Over the Rhine as a personal affront. She was furious that someone had dared to violate the sanctity of her museum, and she was determined to bring the culprit to justice. She trusted Mr. Johnson's judgment implicitly and gave him full authority to conduct the investigation. When Mr. Johnson informed her that Alex was the prime suspect, Mrs. Ainsworth was shocked. She had always considered Alex to be a reliable and trustworthy employee. She couldn't believe that he was capable of such a brazen act of betrayal. But she knew that she couldn't let her personal feelings cloud her judgment. She had a responsibility to protect the museum and its collection, and she would do whatever it took to recover the stolen painting and punish the thief. She joined Mr. Johnson and the police as they confronted Alex with the evidence. She watched as Alex's face turned pale, as his carefully constructed facade crumbled before her eyes. She saw the fear in his eyes, the desperation in his voice. When confronted with the notebooks, the receipts, and the sticky note, Alex initially denied any involvement in the theft. He claimed that he was being framed, that someone was trying to sabotage him. But as the evidence mounted, his story began to unravel. Finally, he broke down and confessed. He admitted that he had planned the theft for months, that he had created the replica painting, and that he had staged the distraction to divert the guards. He explained his motives, his desire for a better life, his belief that he deserved more than what he had. Mrs. Ainsworth listened to his confession with a mixture of anger and disappointment. She couldn't understand how someone could be so blinded by greed, so willing to risk everything for a chance at wealth and luxury. She asked him where he had hidden the original painting. Alex hesitated for a moment, then revealed its location. The police immediately dispatched a team to Alex's apartment, where they recovered Starry Night Over the Rhine unharmed. Mrs. Ainsworth felt a surge of relief. The painting was safe. The museum was secure. Justice had been served. But she also felt a deep sense of sadness. She had lost a valuable employee, a trusted colleague, and a friend. She knew that the museum would recover from this incident. But she also knew that things would never be quite the same. The theft of Starry Night Over the Rhine had exposed a vulnerability, a weakness in the museum's security. And it had shattered her faith in human nature. As Alex was led away in handcuffs, Mrs. Ainsworth couldn't help but wonder what had driven him to commit such a desperate act. Was it simply greed? Or was it something more? Was it a reflection of the society in which they lived, a society that placed too much emphasis on wealth and success? She knew that she would probably never know the answer. But she also knew that she had a responsibility to learn from this experience, to strengthen the museum's security, and to ensure that something like this never happened again. The recovery of Starry Night Over the Rhine was a triumph for the museum, a victory for justice, and a testament to the power of human observation and determination. But it was also a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans can be undone by a simple mistake, a forgotten sticky note, and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. Alex stood before Mrs. Ainsworth and Mr. Johnson, the weight of the evidence crushing him. He knew the game was up. The carefully constructed lies he had prepared evaporated under their steely gazes. "Alex," Mrs. Ainsworth began, her voice laced with disappointment, "we found this in your office trash can." She held up the small, yellow sticky note. "Can you explain what this means?" Alex averted his eyes, his hands trembling. He knew exactly what the note meant. It was a reminder, a key piece of his meticulously planned operation. A piece he had carelessly discarded, thinking it was no longer needed. He stammered, trying to come up with an explanation, but the words caught in his throat. He knew that any attempt to deny his involvement would be futile. The evidence was overwhelming. "Saturday, Rhine, 3 p.m. Mr. Johnson repeated, his voice low and menacing. "What were you doing on Saturday at 3 p.m. near Starry Night Over the Rhine?" Alex remained silent, his head bowed in shame. He knew that he had no choice but to confess. He had been caught red-handed. He began to recount his story, starting with his initial idea, his meticulous planning, and his execution of the heist. He described how he had created the replica painting, how he had studied the museum's security protocols, and how he had staged the distraction to divert the guards. He explained his motives, his desire for a better life, his belief that he deserved more than what he had. He pleaded for their understanding, but he knew that his words were falling on deaf ears. Mrs. Ainsworth listened to his confession with a mixture of anger and sadness. She couldn't believe that someone she had trusted could be capable of such a betrayal. She felt a deep sense of disappointment, not just in Alex, but in herself for misjudging his character. Mr. Johnson remained impassive, his expression unreadable. He had heard countless confessions in his career, and he was not easily swayed by emotion. He was focused on the facts, on gathering the evidence, and on ensuring that justice was served. As Alex finished his confession, Mrs. Ainsworth asked him one final question. Why, Alex? Why did you do this? Alex looked up, his eyes filled with tears. I just wanted a better life, he said, his voice barely audible. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be happy. Mrs. Ainsworth shook her head in disbelief. And you thought stealing a priceless work of art was the way to achieve happiness? Alex remained silent, his head bowed once again. He knew that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had thrown away his career, his reputation, and his freedom for a fleeting chance at wealth and luxury. As the police led him away, Alex couldn't help but reflect on the events that had led to his downfall. He had been so close to achieving his dreams, so close to escaping his ordinary life. But his ambition had blinded him, leading him down a path of deception and destruction. And it had all started with a tiny yellow sticky note, a forgotten reminder that had ultimately unraveled his entire plan. A simple mistake that had cost him everything. News of Alex's arrest spread quickly throughout the museum, sending shockwaves through the staff. Many couldn't believe that he was capable of such a crime. He had always seemed like such a quiet, unassuming employee. Sarah, in particular, felt a mix of emotions. She was proud of herself for noticing the crooked frame and for trusting her instincts. But she also felt a sense of sadness for Alex. She had worked with him for years, and she had always considered him to be a friend. She knew that he had made a terrible mistake, but she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. She wondered what had driven him to commit such a desperate act. Was it simply greed? Or was it something more? She decided to visit Alex in jail. She wanted to understand his motives, to hear his side of the story. She knew that it wouldn't change what he had done, but she felt that she owed it to him, and to herself, to try to understand. When she arrived at the jail, she was led to a small visiting room. Alex was waiting for her, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a different person. Sarah, he said, his voice barely audible. Thank you for coming. Sarah sat down across from him, her heart filled with sympathy. I just wanted to talk to you, Alex, she said. I wanted to understand why you did this. Alex sighed and began to recount his story, starting with his childhood and his dreams of a better life. He described his frustration with his mundane job, his envy of the wealthy art collectors who visited the museum, and his desire to escape his ordinary existence. He explained how he had come up with the idea to steal Starry Night over the Rhine, how he had planned the heist for months, and how he had created the replica painting. He admitted that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had let his ambition cloud his judgment. I just wanted to be someone, Sarah, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be happy. Sarah listened to his story with a mix of understanding and sadness. She knew that his motives were not entirely malicious, but she also knew that he had committed a serious crime. I understand that you wanted a better life, Alex, she said. But stealing a priceless work of art was not the way to achieve it. You have hurt a lot of people, including yourself. Alex nodded in agreement. I know, he said. I've ruined my life. I've let everyone down. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. It's not too late to turn your life around, Alex, she said. You can learn from this experience, and you can make amends for what you have done. Alex squeezed her hand tightly. Thank you, Sarah, he said. You're a true friend. Sarah smiled sadly. I'll always be your friend, Alex, she said. But you have to understand that what you did was wrong. You have to accept the consequences of your actions. Alex nodded in agreement. He knew that she was right. He had to face the music. He had to pay for his crimes. As Sarah left the jail, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for Alex. She believed that he had the potential to turn his life around, to learn from his mistakes, and to become a better person. But she also knew that it would be a long and difficult journey. And it had all started with a crooked frame, a forgotten sticky note, and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. A series of seemingly insignificant events that had ultimately led to the downfall of a would-be art thief. The trial of Alex became a media sensation. The story of the would-be art thief who had been foiled by a sticky note captured the imagination of the public. The courtroom was packed with reporters, artists, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the final act of this real-life drama. The prosecution presented a compelling case, laying out the evidence against Alex in meticulous detail. They presented the replica painting, the notebooks filled with plans, the receipt from the art supply store, and, of course, the infamous sticky note. The defense argued that Alex was not a criminal mastermind, but a desperate man who had been driven to extreme measures by his circumstances. They portrayed him as a victim of society, a man who had been seduced by the lure of wealth and luxury. Alex took the stand in his own defense. He spoke eloquently and passionately, explaining his motives and expressing his remorse. He admitted that he had made a terrible mistake, but he pleaded for leniency, arguing that he had already suffered enough. The jury deliberated for several hours before reaching a verdict. They found Alex guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As he was led away from the courtroom, Alex turned to Sarah and offered her a weak smile. "Thank you for everything, Sarah," he said. "You're a true friend." Sarah nodded sadly. She knew that Alex's life would never be the same. But she also believed that he had the potential to turn his life around, to learn from his mistakes, and to make amends for what he had done. In the years that followed, Sarah remained in contact with Alex, visiting him in prison and writing him letters. She encouraged him to pursue his artistic talents, to learn new skills, and to prepare for a better life after his release. Alex took her advice to heart. He enrolled in art classes, learned to paint, and even started selling his artwork to fellow inmates. He also used his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes and to develop a new perspective on life. When he was released from prison, Alex was a changed man. He was no longer driven by greed or ambition. He had learned to appreciate the simple things in life, to value friendship and loyalty, and to find happiness in creativity and self-expression. He moved to a small town, found a job as an art teacher, and started a new life. He never forgot his past, but he refused to let it define him. He was determined to make amends for his mistakes and to live a life of honesty and integrity. And it had all started with a crooked frame, a forgotten sticky note, and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. A series of seemingly insignificant events that had ultimately led to the downfall of a would-be art thief and the redemption of a lost soul. The story of Alex and Starry Night Over the Rhine became a legend in the art world, a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the importance of attention to detail. It was a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans can be undone by a simple mistake, and that even the most hardened criminals can find redemption. And it was a testament to the power of human observation, the value of friendship, and the enduring beauty of art. A beauty that could inspire both greed and redemption, both theft and forgiveness. A beauty that could transform a would-be art thief into a man worthy of a second chance. The City Art Museum learned a valuable lesson from the theft of Starry Night Over the Rhine. They immediately implemented new security measures, including increased surveillance, improved alarm systems, and more rigorous background checks for employees. They also established a closer working relationship with local law enforcement, conducting regular security drills and sharing information about potential threats. They realized that security was not just a matter of technology and procedures, but also a matter of human vigilance and cooperation. Mrs. Ainsworth, in particular, became a champion for art education and community outreach. She believed that art had the power to inspire and transform lives, and she wanted to make it accessible to everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. She established a scholarship program for underprivileged students who wanted to pursue careers in art. She also created a series of free art workshops for children and adults, designed to foster creativity and self-expression. She realized that Alex's story was not just a cautionary tale, but also an opportunity to promote the positive values of art and culture. She wanted to show the world that art was not just about money and prestige, but about beauty, inspiration, and human connection. Sarah continued to work at the museum, becoming a mentor to new security guards and a trusted advisor to Mrs. Ainsworth. She used her experience with the Starry Night over the Rhine case to teach others about the importance of attention to detail and the power of intuition. She also became an advocate for art education, volunteering her time to teach art classes in local schools and community centers. She believed that art could help young people develop critical thinking skills, creativity, and self-confidence. She never forgot Alex, and she continued to visit him in prison and write him letters. She believed that he had the potential to make a positive contribution to society, and she wanted to support him in any way that she could. The story of Alex and Starry Night over the Rhine became a part of the museum's history, a reminder of the challenges and the triumphs that they had faced. It was a story that they shared with visitors, not as a source of shame or embarrassment, but as a testament to their resilience and their commitment to art. And it was a story that continued to inspire and transform lives, long after the sticky note had been discarded and the painting had been recovered. A story that showed the world that even the most difficult experiences can lead to growth, understanding, and redemption. A story that proved that art had the power to heal, to inspire, and to connect us all. A power that could transform a would-be art thief into a man worthy of forgiveness and a museum into a beacon of hope and inspiration. Years later, Starry Night over the Rhine still hung in the City Art Museum, its beauty undiminished by the events that had transpired. Visitors from around the world came to admire its vibrant colors, its serene landscape, and its timeless appeal. Many of them knew the story of Alex, the would-be art thief who had tried to steal the painting but had been foiled by a sticky note. They marveled at the audacity of his plan, the meticulousness of his execution, and the sheer luck that had led to his downfall. They also learned about Sarah, the security guard with a keen eye for detail, and Mrs. Ainsworth, the museum director who had turned a crisis into an opportunity. They were inspired by their courage, their dedication, and their commitment to art. The story of Starry Night over the Rhine became a part of the museum's identity, a reminder of the importance of security, the value of community, and the power of art to connect us all. And it all started with a crooked frame, a forgotten sticky note, and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. A series of seemingly insignificant events that had ultimately transformed the lives of everyone involved. Alex's story serves as a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans can be undone by a simple mistake. It highlights the importance of attention to detail, the value of honesty and integrity, and the dangers of greed and ambition. It also shows that redemption is possible, that even those who have made terrible mistakes can find a new path in life, and that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. And it is a testament to the power of art, its ability to inspire, to transform, and to connect us all. A power that can turn a would-be art thief into a man worthy of a second chance and a museum into a beacon of hope and inspiration. So, the next time you visit an art museum, take a moment to appreciate not just the beauty of the artwork, but also the stories behind it. Remember the artists who created these masterpieces, the people who protect them, and the lessons that they can teach us about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. And remember the story of Alex and Starry Night over the Rhine, a reminder that even the smallest details can have a profound impact, and that even the most ordinary people can be capable of extraordinary things. Both good and bad. A story that shows us that life is a work of art, and that we are all artists, creating our own masterpieces, one brushstroke at a time. And that it's important to pay attention to every detail, to choose our colors carefully, and to create a work of art that is both beautiful and meaningful. Because in the end, it's not just about the art that we create, but about the lives that we live. And it's about the stories that we tell, the lessons that we learn, and the legacy that we leave behind. And it all started with a crooked frame, a forgotten sticky note, and a security guard with a keen eye for detail. A reminder that even the smallest details can change the course of history.